Welcome to the Small Town Source, a deep dive on the Bible teaching of Sycamore Community Church. I'm Max.
And I'm Parker.
Today's episode is a deep dive into Russell Moore's fascinating article on the current state of war in the Middle East. And it's entitled, Why I Changed My Mind on Bible Prophecy and Politics. So here we go.
We are simply unpacking Russell Moore's personal theological journey and the observations he's written down, just so we can understand the underlying mechanics of his argument.
Absolutely. So have you ever noticed how quickly rumors of war in the Middle East cause people to just instantly dust off their biblical prophecy charts?
Oh, immediately. It's like clockwork.
Right. A conflict flares up on the news, and suddenly everyone is scrambling to match modern headlines to ancient texts from Ezekiel or Revelation.
Yeah, drawing lines everywhere.
Our goal today is to explore exactly why we do this. And more importantly, we're looking at why Moore, a guy who has spent his entire career studying this exact intersection of religion and public life, why he completely flipped his perspective on how politics and theology actually influence each other.
Yeah, and to appreciate just how massive this shift in thinking is for him, we really have to establish what his baseline was. Like, what did he used to believe?
His starting point, basically.
Right. So decades ago, Moore wrote his doctoral dissertation, and it was heavily influenced by a theologian named Carl F.H. Henry. At the time, the prevailing consensus in that whole world was essentially a one-way street.
Meaning theology drives the car.
Exactly. Your theology is what dictated your politics, specifically your view of the end times, like how you believed human history was ultimately going to wrap up. That dictated your level of social and political action in the present day.
And Moore breaks this historical dynamic down into two main camps to show how this works, which is really helpful. The first camp is what you might call the kingdom now, or utopian view.
The optimist, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. This is the belief that human effort, rigorous social reform, and dedicated political action can essentially construct God's kingdom right here on earth, just, brick by brick.
Right, and the natural behavioral outcome of that kingdom now approach is this intense focus on social action. Believers in this camp, they throw themselves into restructuring society, fighting for sweeping policy changes, and they engage super heavily in the political machine.
But there's a trap there, right?
Oh, a massive trap, which Moore and Henry both pointed out. This utopian view almost always ends in severe burnout and, deep disillusionment.
Because human systems are flawed.
Exactly. Human systems are inherently flawed, so that perfect utopian vision, it never actually arrives. And when the political victories don't magically usher in paradise, the religion risks becoming nothing more than a political action committee. It completely loses its focus on personal, spiritual renewal.
Right, it just becomes another voting block. Then you flip the coin to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. The second camp holds the kingdom future view, which is a much more pessimistic premillennial perspective.
Which basically means they believe the world is too fundamentally broken to fix through human effort.
Right.
And history is just this downward spiral until we get a literal, sudden, 1,000-year reign of Christ to just overwrite the whole thing.
Yeah, it's the idea that the world is just going to keep degrading until a cataclysmic rescue mission happens. So the behavioral result of that theology is, well, it's a complete deadening of concern for social action.
Because why bother?
Exactly. If the world is a sinking ship, why are you polishing the brass? In this framework, systemic problems, political corruption, environmental issues, all of it is viewed as a total distraction. The only mission that counts is getting people into the lifeboat before the ship goes under.
That is a great way to put it.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's like deciding how to treat a house you're living in. If you believe you own it forever, the kingdom now mentality, you invest in it.
You'd have to, yeah.
You fix the plumbing, you patch the roof, because you expect to inhabit the space for the long haul. But if you believe the building is rigged to explode tomorrow, the kingdom future mindset, you don't care about a leaky sink.
Right, you're not repainting the guest room.
You don't care about the peeling paint. Your absolute only goal is running through the halls, grabbing people by the collar, and pulling them out the front door before the whole thing comes down.
Yeah, and Moore still agrees with that foundational framework. He still argues that viewing the kingdom as either entirely present or entirely future creates those distinct behavioral pitfalls.
But here comes the twist.
Here is the critical twist that absolutely blew up his old understanding. He noticed a massive contradiction. He asked, what happens when the people who are supposedly sprinting out the front door of that doomed house suddenly stop in the driveway and become violently obsessed with who is running the homeowners association?
Right. Wait, if the house is literally seconds away from exploding, why on earth do you care who the president of the HOA is? It makes zero logical sense.
None. And that contradiction is the heart of Moore's aha moment. If the old one-way street was correct, that your theology dictates your politics, then why was he seeing this intense political obsession from the lifeboat crowd?
The people who aren't supposed to care about worldly stuff at all.
Exactly. He changed his mind because the observable track record of modern prophecy predictions over the last 50 years proves the street runs the other direction.
Ah, so politics isn't the passenger.
No, politics is driving the car, and it's dragging theology along for the ride.
And the evidence he brings to the table is just, it's a wild trip through recent history. He maps out these incredibly confident yet historically failed prophecy claims from the last few decades, and he shows how they just perfectly mirrored the specific geopolitical terrors of whatever decade they were made in.
It's so transparent when you look back at it. Take the 1970s and 80s, during the absolute height of the Cold War. Prophecy teachers were standing on stages absolutely certain that they were the terminal generation.
The very last ones.
Yep, they would open up the book of Ezekiel and claim it clearly prophesied the rise of the European common market as this apocalyptic 10-horned beast.
Oh, wow.
Or they would point to the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan and say, look, this is it. This is the definitive biblical trigger for Armageddon.
Because it matched the overwhelming political fear of communism perfectly.
Precisely. And people bought millions of books based on this exact premise.
But then the calendar turns. The Soviet Union collapses, the Berlin Wall gets hammered into souvenirs, and the European common market just becomes, a standard trade bloc.
It's not a 10-horned beast anymore.
No. Suddenly, the prophecy charts need an emergency update. So we move into the 1990s. The geopolitical anxiety shifts away from the Cold War and focuses on the Middle East, specifically the Gulf War.
Right.
Almost overnight, the new undeniable prophetic truth was that Saddam Hussein was secretly reconstructing the ancient Babylonian Empire, and that was the real trigger for the end times. The USSR was totally forgotten. Saddam was the new biblical villain.
Which brings us to today. The current anxieties revolve heavily around Iran. Moore points out that prominent prosperity gospel preachers like John Hagee are currently standing in their pulpits claiming that an impending war with Iran is the specific prompt the Bible predicted for the end times.
The exact same playbook.
It is. And the irony Moore notes here is just staggering. This is the exact same apocalyptic rhetoric Hagee used almost a quarter century ago regarding the Iraq War.
Wow.
The country changed, the target changed, but the apocalyptic framing just got recycled. What's fascinating here is the behavioral pattern that emerges when these massive world-ending predictions turn out to be entirely wrong.
You'd think there would be some backtracking.
You would expect a moment of deep reflection, right? You would expect a teacher to step back and say, I was clearly wrong about the Soviet Union or Saddam Hussein. Let me reassess my interpretive framework and figure out where my methodology failed.
They don't do that.
They never reassess. They simply erase the old whiteboard and draw a new chart. The absolute certainty of their tone never wavers at all. Only the target shifts to match the new terrifying headline on the evening news.
Wait, I'm stuck on something here. Let me ask you about this, because if these Kingdom Future folks are so hyper-focused on heaven, the afterlife, and the world burning up, shouldn't that make them completely detached from earthly politics?
Yeah, I think so.
Like, why do they care about foreign policy at all if they think the Earth is doomed?
That is the standard assumption, yeah.
Yeah.
We tend to caricature these groups as having their heads so far in the clouds they can't even see the ground. But Moore arrived at a really unsettling realization about this. The problem isn't that they are too otherworldly or hyper-spiritual. The problem, as he defines it, is carnality.
Carnality, that's a heavy, loaded theological word.
It really is. Carnality means being driven by the flesh, by earthly desires, status, power, and worldly systems. Moore realized that these specific prophetic movements don't love the present world too little.
They love it too much.
They actually love it way too much. Their underlying obsession isn't truly with the celestial kingdom coming down. Their obsession is with the immediate earthly political power struggles happening right now.
So they're just using the religion as a cover.
They are simply using the dramatic language of the apocalypse to validate their earthly political goals and terrify their opponents.
Okay, so if they are actually driven by worldly attachment, by this carnality, How does that translate into everyday ground level politics? How do they justify it to themselves?
This brings us to what Moore describes as the weave.
The weave,
It's
yes.
the way believers seamlessly intertwine their theology with whatever their political tribe happens to want at that exact moment.
Because the interpretation of the Bible isn't static based on the actual text. It becomes entirely fluid based on the party platform. The foreign policy whiplash over the last decade is probably the most glaring example of this mechanism at work.
Oh, absolutely.
Think back a few years when a certain political tribe wanted an America First, strict isolationist policy. The goal was no foreign entanglements, pulling back from the global stage, closing ranks.
And the prophecy teachers were right there to back it up. They claimed this isolationism was God saving America from a globalist New World Order.
Right.
They would find verses about staying separate from the nations and just apply them to modern trade deals. Isolationism was suddenly a divine mandate. The theology functioned as a protective shield for the non-interventionist political desire. But then, the political winds shifted drastically. Under the Trump administration, the strategy changed to active intervention, taking aggressive action toward Iran, getting involved in Venezuela.
The platform did a total 180.
A complete 180 from isolationism to interventionism.
And miraculously, the prophetic interpretations flipped perfectly to match. Suddenly, intervening in foreign nations wasn't globalism anymore. It was the prophesied righteous thing to do.
Oh, yeah?
Pastors were suddenly comparing political leaders to ancient biblical kings like Cyrus the Great, claiming God was using them to strike down his enemies. The theology did a complete 180-degree turn just to keep pace with the political tribe.
It's a stunning theological gymnastics routine.
True.
And Moore points out that this same tribal weave infects domestic social action as well. There is a glaring historical hypocrisy in how these groups selectively apply the biblical calling to be salt and light in the world.
Look, with prohibition, right?
Exactly. Look at the Prohibition era. The fight against alcohol was considered a mandatory God-ordained social action. The church was fully mobilized politically. They marched, they lobbied, they literally changed the Constitution.
But fast forward to the Civil Rights era, when the pressing issue of the day was Jim Crow laws, systemic racism, and police state segregation. Suddenly, fighting that systemic injustice was dismissed by many in those exact same theological camps as a distraction.
A total shift in priorities.
They suddenly claimed that God forbids bringing politics into the church, and that ministers should just preach the gospel and focus only on saving souls.
The rules of engagement changed entirely based on what the political tribe was comfortable with at the time. Fighting alcohol was doing God's work. Fighting segregation was a political distraction.
Wow.
And Moore notes that the exact same dynamic is alive and well today. If the issue at hand is abortion or gambling, that is widely accepted by the tribe as Christians rightfully standing up for moral truth in the public square.
But if the issue turns to the treatment of refugees, addressing poverty, or fighting racial prejudice, things the text actually talks about extensively, suddenly, those issues are dismissed by the tribe as a social justice distraction or Marxism.
And just a quick reminder for you listening, as we navigate these historical examples, we are purely tracing Moore's critique of how tribalism operates across different eras.
Right, keeping our neutral stance here.
Exactly. We're looking at the mechanism of how theology is utilized to justify shifting political stances, not evaluating the policies themselves.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the way we use theology in this tribal system is basically like using a customized search filter on an online store.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. When you're shopping, you check the boxes for exactly what you want, size 10, blue running shoe, and the algorithm hides everything else. Moore is saying we do the exact same thing with our theology.
We filter the Bible.
Yes. You only check the theological boxes for the issues your specific political party already cares about. You filter out all the verses that challenge your platform, and suddenly, the ancient text seems to perfectly mirror your modern voting record.
You are applying a pre-existing tribal filter to the text, ensuring that it only ever echoes your own current political opinions back to you. You are never challenged by the divine. You are only ever validated by it. It's a closed loop.
So we've thoroughly diagnosed this problem. We're looking at a landscape of malleable, politically driven theology that acts as a mirror for our own earthly carnality. The obvious question for you listening is, well, what is the way out?
How do we escape the loop?
Exactly. How does Moore suggest we avoid falling into this customized search filter trap?
The solution requires a fundamental pivot in where we are looking. Moore argues that we have to stop trying to decipher current events. We have to stop looking for the what and start looking for the who.
A who. Okay.
Yeah. And to do this, he anchors his argument in a specific moment in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17. Jesus is being grilled about when the kingdom of God is going to arrive, and he explicitly tells his disciples that the kingdom isn't an observable political event.
It's not a nation state.
No,
Yeah.
it's not something you can point to on a map or track on a prophecy chart and say, look, here it is in the Middle East. Instead, Jesus says the kingdom of God is in the midst of you.
Because Jesus himself is the kingdom. The kingdom is a person, not a geopolitical boundary or a timeline of military strikes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Moore identifies a profound psychological danger that occurs when we lose sight of that reality. He warns about the danger of boredom.
Boredom, like just not being entertained.
Essentially, yes.
That
He argues that once we get bored by the actual Messiah, once the quiet, profound reality of a kingdom built on enemy love and sacrifice stops being enough to hold our attention, we will inevitably start looking for other messiahs.
we want a better show.
Exactly. We lose our awe at the true kingdom of God, and we start shopping around for other, louder earthly kingdoms to pledge our allegiance to.
And those earthly kingdoms always demand something ugly in return.
Always. Moore argues that this spiritual boredom is what directly leads us to replace genuine faith with Machiavellianism.
The whole ends justify the means thing.
Right. It's the idea that it's perfectly fine to be ruthless, deceptive, and power-hungry, just as long as your political tribe wins the election or passes the bill. We take that ugly ruthlessness, we dress it up in religious language, and we pretend it's a Christian worldview.
When really it's just tribalism.
We engage in vicious, bloodthirsty tribalism and tell ourselves we are just building community.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now, walking the dog, commuting to work? What does this actually mean for your daily life? According to Moore, it means freedom.
Freedom from the exhaustion.
Yes, liberation from an exhausting, endless cycle. Having a proper, anchored view of the kingdom, one that is already here in the person of Jesus, but not yet fully completed, it gives you a compass. It tells you exactly what you should care about right now, which is pursuing justice, making peace, protecting the vulnerable, advocating for the poor.
But at the exact same time, it shields you.
Exactly.
It shields you from the anxiety, the vitriol, and the sheer exhaustion of trying to force a utopian outcome by your own human political power. It frees you from the crushing burden of having to save the world yourself.
You don't have to win every argument on the internet.
No, you don't have to win every political battle or crush your enemies to ensure the kingdom arrives, because the kingdom is already secured. Moore grounds this final point in Acts chapter 1, where Jesus bluntly tells his followers that it is simply not for us to know the times or the seasons that the Father has fixed.
It's none of our business.
It's quite literally none of our business.
Which is such a refreshing admission of human limitation. We don't need to know the schedule.
And Moore models this humility beautifully at the end of his article. After decades of studying this, he flat out admits it. He has no idea what will happen in Iran. He has no idea what the political future of the modern state of Israel is.
He's stepping off the prediction treadmill.
Completely.
Hmm.
He doesn't know if the apocalypse is going to happen in 5 minutes or in 45 million years. And his ultimate point is he doesn't need to know. Because knowing the timeline isn't the point of the faith.
The ultimate takeaway from Russell Moore's piece is a call to drop the decoder ring. We have to stop using CNN or Fox News as an interpretive lens for the Book of Revelation.
It's exhausting.
The constant anxiety of trying to match cable news chyrons to biblical verses is a carnal distraction. As Moore so powerfully puts it, who needs a prophecy chart when we already have the way? The blueprint isn't a timeline. The blueprint is a person.
And Moore warns that we turn to the toxic, exhausting world of political tribalism when we get bored with the core of our faith. So ask yourself, what does getting bored with your foundational beliefs look like in your own life?
That's a great question.
Are you treating your spiritual house like it's going to explode tomorrow, just sitting around waiting for the disaster? And when the quiet, steady truth of the kingdom stops feeling exciting enough, what loud, chaotic, earthly distractions are you tempted to replace it with?
That is a phenomenal question to sit with. Thank you for joining us as we unpack this complex and truly fascinating perspective.
Take care, everyone.